red planet, fourth rock from the sun. For centuries, we humans gazed at our neighbor and imagined an alien world. And as human technology advanced and telescopes brought it closer, we began to see signs of life.
As the 20th century began, mainstream credentialed astronomers were looking at Mars, thinking that they saw evidence for a society, a civilization on the red planet.
We Earthlings braced for contact. If there was life on Mars, what form would it take? We set off into space to find out. But as we approached the red planet, we discovered a new mystery.
All the elements needed for life are there, so what happened? Where did everybody go?
Mars is almost Shakespearean. A beguiling world. It's tricking us every way.
Is Mars dead or alive? Some people think the planet was home to an ancient civilization.
There was at one time intelligent life on Mars, and they built something.
But hard evidence continues to elude us.
If there's life there, we'll find it.
Across the globe, the race is on to make the greatest discovery of all. We're joined by skeptics and believers alike as we try to determine if there really is life on Mars. Should anyone be planning a trip to the planet Mars, here are a few travel tips you might like to consider in order to make your journey as comfortable as possible. The expedition will take about 2.5 years, including approximately 12 months on board your interplanetary spaceship. So, make yourself comfortable. You should plan your provisions carefully. You'll need to bring plenty of water because at this time there's no liquid H2O anywhere on the planet's surface. You'll also need an effective spacesuit and a sufficient supply of breathable air. And finally, Mars is about 1.5 times further from the Sun than Earth, which means it's a cold world where the temperatures can drop to a chilly -90 degrees Celsius. So, remember to dress warmly. But these technical issues aside, Mars has much to offer. It's home to the largest known volcano in our solar system, a magnificent Grand Canyon, and breathtaking deserts. And for all those interested in culture, a visit to the celebrated Face is a must. All in all, a trip to Mars is sure to be a rewarding one. In fact, without ever stepping foot on Mars, we know a lot about this distant planet. But what we don't know is whether or not it contains life. When the first astronauts eventually do arrive on Mars, who or what will they find? Will aliens be there to greet them? Or will there be nothing at all? The question of whether there's life on Mars is a fundamental one, because it's synonymous with the question of whether or not we're alone in the universe.
If we go to Mars and find evidence that there was life on Mars or is life on Mars, then we'd be able to say that in our own solar system life appeared twice. And I think that would be convincing evidence that the universe is full of life.
Discovering life on Mars could also reveal a lot about our own existence.
We have one kind of life adapted to one planet, even with all of its diversity. So looking at the way other planets may have given rise to a phenomenon that we would recognize as life can enable us to understand our own kind of life in a deep and fundamental way.
The stakes are high in the game of life, and Mars may hold the key.
If we're going to find proof of life on Mars, we're going to have to go to Mars to get it.
But getting to Mars isn't easy. The Apollo astronauts took about 2 days to get to the Moon. A journey to Mars one way would take roughly 7 months. Mars takes about twice as long to orbit the Sun as the Earth, so a space mission would have to plan departure when the two planets are close. And the challenge of bringing a mission back is incalculable in its complexity. just one of the reasons no manned mission has ever been attempted. But that's exactly what Dr. Robert Zubrin of the Mars Society wants to do. Zubrin is an astronautical engineer with 15 years experience in the space industry. He's been planning a trip to Mars for the last 2 decades, and he's come up with a novel way to do it.
If we want to go to Mars, we need to travel light, live off the land.
What makes the Mars mission so prohibitively expensive is the amount of mass, mostly rocket propellant, that would have to be sent there and back. But Dr. Zubrin's plan is to take only enough supplies to get there, then make the rest on the planet itself.
There's 3 things we want to make on Mars. First, most importantly, propellant. After that, water. And third, oxygen. We can make all 3 with this machine.
Here's how it works.
The Martian atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide gas. We pump that into the reactor. We mix that with a little bit of hydrogen. You can make that reaction produce either methane or carbon monoxide or any mixture of the 2. And water.
The methane and carbon monoxide mixtures can be used as rocket propellants for the return trip to Earth.
The water, we could keep the water and drink it, or we can electrolyze it into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen that comes off, we could use as breathing oxygen, we could use as rocket-propelled oxygen. That's how the machine works. It makes your fuel, it makes your oxygen, it makes your water.
That means there's enough room on the spaceship for food. It looks simple, and it's not just theory. Working with simulated Martian air, Zubrin has spent years testing and refining this technology.
This is a subscale methane, carbon monoxide, oxygen rocket engine. It all works. It works great. These are great propellants. We start them right up with a spark plug time after time.
Despite Zubrin's work, current thinking is that it's too expensive and too dangerous to send a manned mission to Mars. Instead, the international space community has deployed a range of unmanned robotic explorers on and around the planet. But Zubrin points out that using robots to do field research leaves a lot to be desired.
Okay, we can send robots to Mars. And I support sending robots to Mars. I think we ought to send a lot more robots to Mars. Okay, robots can make all kinds of discoveries. They can give us all kinds of data. They can image the surface of the planet and possibly identify interesting targets for exploration. But they won't tell us the answers that we need to know. They won't tell us if there's life on Mars.
So what does Zubrin think about the possibility of life?
I think that a naturalistic view of the universe would suggest that the Earth is not special, and that if life can evolve here, it could evolve elsewhere where environmental conditions are similar. And if there's life there, we'll find it.
But there could be an easier way to find out. In fact, the answer could already be right here on Earth. Every year, hundreds, maybe even thousands of aliens come to our planet. Most arrive quietly and go unnoticed, but some enter the atmosphere in a blaze of glory. These aliens are meteorites. For centuries, these rocks from the sky were treated as curiosities, and often ended up in local museums or private collections. But the information meteorites contain is so valuable that these days, the scientific community sends search parties to find them. Meteorites fall randomly all over the Earth, but one of the most popular hunting grounds is Antarctica. Every year, scores of scientists risk their lives and head to the frozen continent. There, they conduct systematic grid searches of the icy landscape, looking for telltale dark shapes against the blue-white of the ice. It was on an expedition such as this that one particular meteorite was found, one that shook the scientific community to its core. The Discovery team sent it to a special facility at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where NASA keeps its aliens. This is 84001, also known as the Allen Hills meteorite. The strange green rock was kept under strict quarantine. It was processed, examined, and rigorously interrogated for information about its home world. And although it took 10 years, investigators finally learned the truth. This rock came from Mars, and it had a secret to tell.
Today, Rock 84001 speaks to us across all those billions of years and millions of miles. It speaks of the possibility of life.
The best evidence of life on Mars may not be hidden deep within alien rock at all. There are some people who believe that a vital clue is staring us right in the face. Richard Hoagland has dedicated his life to examining imagery transmitted to Earth from various Mars orbiters, surveillance systems that have circled the red planet for over 30 years. In the first pictures that the 1976 Viking orbiters sent back from the planet's surface, Hoagland saw something incredible.
I looked at this and it was like, oh my God. This thing had symmetry, it had proportion, it looked like a statue.
Hoagland is referring to this remarkable image. A face-like structure the size of several city blocks. And that's not all Hoagland thought he saw. There were other structures surrounding the icon, eroded by time, that resembled the ruins of a monumental city.
It looked eerily like an aerial photograph taken flying over Giza, looking down at the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. It looked like a ceremonial complex built by somebody with a huge sphinx-like creature staring up into space from the sands of Mars at the telescope orbiting 1,000 miles overhead. Somebody was down there, and they cared enough to leave the very best.
Over the years, Hoagland's theory has raised a few eyebrows. But did life on Mars really exist? Was there once an ancient civilization of alien life forms? And if so, where did they go? The idea that Mars was occupied by a race of intelligent extraterrestrials came not from science fiction, but science fact. In the early days of humankind, Mars burned faintly red in the night sky, leading some to equate it with a mighty god, naturally, the god of war. But then astrologers, using a new contraption called the telescope, determined that some of the lights in the sky could in fact be planets, much like our own. And that meant there might be other civilizations and other life forms out there. The reason Mars became the star attraction was thanks to an Italian astronomer named Giovanni Schiaparelli. In 1877, Schiaparelli trained his telescope on the Martian surface and observed the existence of what he called canali. By this he meant natural channels, but due to an unfortunate translation, channels became canals, which implied man-made structures. The word canal, now applied to Mars, immediately sparked the public imagination. If there were canals on Mars, especially ones big enough to be seen from Earth, then extremely intelligent beings must have built them. The rumor was dramatically compounded by an American astronomer named Percival Lowell. Lowell was a highly respected man of good society who had a profound love of astronomy. He developed a fascination with the canals of Mars and would sit up through the night observing the red planet. But what Lowell thought he saw there was a dying world crisscrossed by constructed waterways. Perhaps, he wrote, creatures short on water have built an irrigation system that circled the planet. By the turn of the 20th century, the idea that Mars was occupied had been taken up by mainstream media. In 1911, the New York Times proclaimed, Martians built 2 immense canals in 2 years. Martian civilization was generally perceived as being more advanced than ours. But each earthbound nation also projected onto Martian society the visions and fears of its own future. this 1924 movie from Russia, for example, Mars was portrayed as going through a proletariat revolution and ending up successfully communist. But many people thought that Mars was dying, and some believed it was only a matter of time before the Martians would try to contact us. In fact, some people thought they had, using another new technology.
This is Seth Shostak. Go ahead, caller. Indeed.
Radio.
When those cameras...
Astronomer Seth Shostak explains.
See anything except what looked like... It goes right back to those early radio pioneers, and none so directly as to Nikola Tesla.
One of the most brilliant electrical engineers of all time, Nikola Tesla was the first person to claim that someone from beyond this planet was trying to get our attention. In 1899, Tesla was experimenting with an electric invention that essentially acted as a large antenna, when he noted something strange. Repetitive signals, substantially different from those he'd noted from storms and general Earth noise.
And it's only natural to imagine that he would ascribe this to some sort of intelligent beings, because as far as Tesla knew, only transmitters could make radio sounds. So he naturally assumed that if he heard something, somebody was broadcasting it.
Tesla was probably mistaken, as Shostak often gets to explain on his weekly radio show.
Oh, that wasn't your question? Well, we don't know for sure what Tesla heard, but most likely it was something that we call whistlers. These are just distant thunderstorms, lightning discharges that produce natural radio waves that get distorted by the atmosphere as they propagate around the Earth and make a sound that kind of sounds like a whistle.
Modern science may have an explanation for the signals, but in a way Tesla was ahead of his time. The idea that you could send signals from one planet to another made sense, and inspired subsequent radio enthusiasts to listen out for signals from outer space. But if there ever was a message, it seems we humans didn't get it, at which point the Martians turned nasty.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
In 1938, Mars attacked. In fact, it was an imaginative radio play based on the H.G. Wells book War of the Worlds. But many people believed it and thought that Earth was under imminent threat from aliens. And sure enough, Martians appeared from the skies and landed in our movie theaters. Although they came in a bewildering variety of shapes and sizes. They were armed with laser guns, evaporators, death rays, and deadly kisses. They wanted gold, weapons, Earth women, and human blood, and they were very rarely friendly. Before long, real flying saucers were being reported everywhere, from San Francisco to Timbuktu. And the phenomenon of alien abductions was born. The world, it seemed, was crazy about extraterrestrials. But this leap in popular imagination actually paved the way for mankind to take it scientifically. By the early 1960s, both Russia and the United States had successfully sent men into space, and that much closer to the communists of Mars. In fact, they only got as far as the moon, and there were no aliens there. But the fact remained that if we could make such a trip, then extraterrestrial life capable of interplanetary flight was at least a possibility. With improvements in technology, we eventually sent a robotic scout to Mars. The landing was a success. The robot touched down, the camera turned on, and we finally got a good look at the red planet. Wasn't what we expected.
How disappointing after centuries of assumption that Mars was inhabited, that it had cities, it had canals, and the reality was that it was just this terrible, awful, dead-looking place.
After years of speculation, it appeared that Mars was dead. But is this true? Mars may be unoccupied now, but if we're to believe Richard Hoagland, the planet once hosted a magnificent civilization. Hoagland is the principal investigator of the Enterprise mission, a a loose collection of scientists, researchers, and Mars enthusiasts who spent years trying to prove this extraordinary theory. As Hoagland explains, the rationale behind their belief is simple.
If I had one catchphrase to describe the whole problem of convincing scientists that there is really an ancient civilization on Mars, it would be, it's the geometry.
A case in point is the face-like structure. NASA claims it's a naturally occurring rock formation, but Hoagland thinks otherwise.
If you actually look at proportions, where the mouth is, where the nose is, where the eyes are, they conform to commonly accepted statues and representations of human forms that go back literally thousands of years.
He's also found what he believes to be a highly complex geometric relationship between various structures centered around the face. Hoagland claims that the layout of this region, named Cydonia, is similar to what we see in ancient ceremonial complexes on Earth.
There are alignments, there's parallelisms, there's right-angle rectilinearity. They also appear to have a specific geometric relationship to the face, to another massive structure down here, to other structures.
To prove his theory, Hoagland and his colleagues have applied a series of computer image analysis programs, looking for things that don't seem to match the surrounding landscape. The face and a couple of other structures register as anomalies, which he claims implies they're artificial constructions.
This is the real image, and this is the fractal representation. And again, it's the signal strength is basically the brightness.
Strictly speaking, a computer will simply find what you program it to look for. It can't determine whether or not an artifact is natural. But Hoagland claims there are some things we can see for ourselves. This pyramid, for example, appears to have a perfect tetrahedral form, with an accurate apex and sharp angles.
This unquestionably had to be made by someone, because nature does not produce this kind of structure. If we were to land someday, find the entrances to this thing, walk inside, because if the exterior is preserved in this extraordinarily pristine form, imagine what waits us on the inside.
But if there was a civilization, what happened to it?
That's where things get interesting, but that's where we obviously cross the line from science to speculation. We have no ground truth, unfortunately.
Hoagland thinks that NASA hasn't investigated these claims because the government is hiding something.
I believe there's a cover-up. Call it a conspiracy if you will, except they're not called conspiracies, they're called policies.
According to Hoagland, it all goes back to an obscure Brookings Institution study commissioned by NASA and published in 1960.
There is a section devoted to the implications of NASA's discovery of extraterrestrial life. And the document recommended that if we were to discover, i.e. NASA were to discover evidence of extraterrestrials, that it should be basically kept secret, because it had the potential at the limit to destroy civilization.
The argument appears to be that where one civilization comes into contact with another that's more technologically advanced, the first civilization's in trouble. So could the US government be covering up aliens to prevent a societal meltdown? In fact, all the Brookings report really suggested was that we should do more studies. Hardly sinister stuff. Seth Shostak also thinks that there's a fundamental flaw in Hoagland's cover-up theory.
Well, doggone it, if the aliens are really here and they're really advanced and they're really malevolent, as they could conceivably be, then it really doesn't matter what the government does it? This is Bambi meets Godzilla, and Godzilla's gonna win.
Shostak himself works for an organization that operates on the assumption that not only is there life out there, some of it has technology. This is the Allen Telescope Array, built and operated by the University of California at Berkeley and the SETI Institute. SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and it's an entirely scientific operation manned by astrophysicists, engineers, and planetary scientists with one simple objective.
It's really easy to send signals between the stars. That's the bottom line fact. There might be thousands, millions, or more societies that are sending information from one star system to the other. Why not look for it?
SETI basically eavesdrops on the universe in an attempt to pick up a signal from outer space. To do this, SETI uses highly sensitive radio receivers that scan systematically through the billions of star systems in our universe. It's like scanning through your car radio dial as you drive, but on a cosmic scale.
Now, what kind of signal are we looking for? We don't care. Looking for the message requires a different kind of technology that we haven't built and won't build until we find that they're on the air. We're just looking for a signal that tells us, hey, their transmitter switch is on.
It may seem a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack, but astronomy has made enormous progress in identifying the stars and planets beyond our solar system. This, combined with ever-improving technology, allows SETI to search with more precision. And their motive is as old as mankind itself.
We're trying to look for something that would show that, we're part of a bigger picture. We're not just a little bit of chemistry run amok on this small little world tucked away in the corner of a nondescript galaxy in an enormous universe.
So, has SETI ever made contact?
In 1997, we picked up a signal using a telescope in West Virginia that looked like the real thing. And we got quite excited to the point where everybody was glued around the computer monitors just looking at what was going on.
The signal had all the qualities SETI looks for in an alien contact. One was that it occurred on a very narrow frequency. Nature produces many radio waves, but these register like broad static across the dial. But this one was emanating from a specific location in the cosmos. Throughout the night, scientists worked to pin down the source.
I realized that the world from that day forward will really not be the same. I was very nervous, actually, because I didn't know what the consequences were going to be.
It took 3 days, but the engineers and scientists finally identified the signal, and it wasn't alien.
As it turned out, the signal was due to a European research satellite, the SOHO satellite, the signal of which had just gotten into the structure of our antenna. And that was a bit disappointing.
To date, the industry experts, SETI, haven't found any evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence.
As of now, one thing you can say, and that is we have not conclusively proven the existence of any life, intelligent or not intelligent, beyond the bounds of Earth.
So what does this mean for Mars? 30 years of remote observation so far appear to have done nothing but confirm that our nearest neighbor is dead. But the idea of life on Mars has begun to make a comeback, and it's all because of water. When NASA scientist Chris McKay saw the 1976 Viking images of a dry, barren Mars, he was intrigued.
I remember the overwhelming impression I got was, the lights are on but nobody's home.
What McKay is referring to is what he poetically calls the ghost of water past. Here in the Mojave Desert, he explains what he means.
There's no water in this lake bed now, but the geology, the surface of the ground, shows evidence that there was water here. And that's what we see on Mars. We see dry lake beds. We see river beds that have no water in them, but clearly did at one time. And this is the evidence that Mars had water. And it's that water that's of interest to us from a biological point of view.
The Mojave actually gets more than 12 centimeters of rain a year. But Dr. McKay uses this desert as a near-waterless zone in which to conduct experiments relevant to his theory about Mars. And it seems that life can thrive in these conditions.
We find microscopic life, microscopic algae, that have learned to survive under dry conditions. This organism, this algae, is the dry version of pond scum. they wait out in the dry for months, maybe years, and then a rain comes and they very quickly set up shop and do their biological thing, and then it gets dry and they shut down and wait again.
Dr. McKay isn't claiming that Mars is populated by desert algae, but he thinks the odds are in favor of past life.
If we were to imagine what would the last Martian have been like, as Mars went from a fairly wet, Earth-like environment to the dry desert that it is today, it would have been probably an organism like this.
So, according to McKay, if life ever existed on Mars, it was probably microbial. And microbes bring us full circle. Some scientists believe we've already found life on Mars because of some mysterious clues discovered in a Martian meteorite. Life on Mars may be less to do with little green men and more to do with little green rocks. The 1976 Viking mission to Mars was a triumph of modern space exploration. But one unexpected bonus was information that could be used to further study our alien visitors. The unidentified meteorites sitting in cold storage on Earth.
Well, we've had meteorites we've known were meteorites for 100 years, but we didn't know they came from Mars until Viking landed and measured the gases in the atmosphere, and scientists studied the gases in these meteorites and showed that they were the same.
How does a Martian rock get to Earth in the first place? Scientists think that an explosion, probably caused by the impact of an asteroid hitting Mars, blasts a rock off the planet and into space. It then hurtles around our solar system until, if it's very lucky, it gets caught by the gravity of our planet and plunges to Earth. For NASA scientist Dr. Everett Gibson, these meteorites have sparked a remarkable voyage of discovery.
For one to have life, you have to have the presence of water, you have to have the presence of carbon, you have to have an energy source, and you have to have geological processes. All of these four fundamental things are seen within the Martian meteorites. So, the conditions could be right for life to exist on Mars, perhaps in the past.
And it seemed that NASA was about to prove it, thanks to that odd little meteorite, 84001, from Mars.
600 million years after this rock was formed in the crust of Mars, you get water percolating through the rocks, saturated in carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere. As the water basically evaporates away, it potentially leaves the carbonate behind.
The meteorite confirmed that Mars had once been wet, but there was more.
Carbonates contain organic matter. The carbonates contain an iron oxide mineral, magnetite.
Here on Earth, magnetite, essentially magnetic crystals, is often produced by microscopic life forms. The investigators then looked even closer using the most powerful microscope at their disposal, and got an even bigger surprise. They saw what looked like minute worm-shaped structures. The scientists were elated, but cautious.
We said one explanation could have been biology operating. Could have been the signatures of something like a life process.
Was this all finally confirmation that there was life on Mars? From the moment they were first announced, the microbes have been controversial. Critics say that the carbonates, organic matter and magnetite crystals can be explained through other non-life processes. And many people believe that the worm-like structures are actually clumps of a coating material used to examine the sample in the laboratory. Others point out that the rock could have been contaminated at any time during the thousands of years it was lying around here on Earth. But nonetheless, the possibility of ancient Martian bacteria has reinvigorated the theory of life on Mars. If, once upon a time, Mars had been warmer and wetter and had some early form of microbial life, did it survive, thrive and grow up to build complex structures? It's a nice idea, but it seems unlikely. especially when you consider that conditions on Mars are dry, radioactive, and extremely cold. It's often suggested that surely nothing could survive in this hostile environment. But perhaps we've been underestimating the nature of microbial life. Astrobiologist Penny Boston is searching for life on Mars by dropping deep into this heart of darkness. This is a lava tube, a subterranean cave formed by underground lava flows during a volcanic eruption thousands of years ago. And Boston has an unusual objective.
Sometimes they're in crevices, sometimes they're kind of hard to see. Ah, there's one.
This is an extremophile.
We're looking for what we astrobiologists call extremophiles in this environment, and that means that they're organisms that are living in very difficult conditions. In this particular case, these organisms are living in a very cold cave right around freezing. They are making their living without benefit of sunlight, and there's almost nothing to eat in this cave.
In recent years, scientists have discovered tenacious microorganisms living in all forms of extreme environment. And if they can do it on Earth, why not on Mars?
We think that Mars is covered with lava tubes. We believe that by looking at organisms that live in these extreme circumstances on Earth, we can learn a lot more on Mars, and that similar Martian organisms may be able to persist on Mars in places very similar to this lava tube.
To find out, Dr. Boston has created her own little Mars environment biospheres. Essentially, she's exposing a range of microscopic Earth life forms to a variety of elements that can be expected on Mars.
They have been subjected to Mars-like levels of high ultraviolet radiation and Mars-like temperature cycles. We have given them atmospheric compositions from very low levels of carbon dioxide with nothing else to perhaps 1/10 the density of Earth's atmosphere, and tested them under those conditions.
So far, she's isolated 36 different strains of organism that thrive quite happily, meaning that in theory at least, life could survive the harsh conditions of Mars. But there's one problem.
There's one thing for sure that we know, and that is that all forms of life on our planet require liquid water. We don't know if that's going to be true on other planets, but we think that where there's going to be life, there's going to have to be water.
This simple fact has helped scientists in the 21st century refine the search for life on Mars into a comprehensive strategy. Dr. Jim Garvin is chief scientist at the Goddard Space Center and a veteran of NASA's Mars exploration program.
NASA uses the term, follow the water. Following the history and record and abundance and inventory of water is a wonderful way to search for something as tough, perhaps elusive, as life.
We already know that Mars was wet in its ancient past and has reservoirs of ice in its polar caps. But using remote sensing technology, NASA has found what could be evidence of a modern water cycle.
We've discovered tens of thousands of hillside gullies that clearly released a fluid, likely liquid water, in the extremely recent geological past.
Scientists have also discovered that Mars has a vast underground reservoir of ice, spanning about 30% of the planet.
The reservoir of water under the surface may include liquid zones. They may be liquid under the ice caps, they may be liquid hundreds of meters deep, they may be liquid tens of meters deep. All that points to a modern liquid water cycle on Mars.
Where there's water, there could be life. And when it comes to the question of life, Dr. Garvin is a believer.
Absence of life in all senses of the word throughout time on Mars. Is that a possibility? I actually believe not. All the right building blocks, initial conditions, the same that we think persisted in early Earth, must have been at Mars. So, the tale of two planets. Where do they diverge?
This is what drives the international space community to take aim at Mars. Over the past 30 years, dozens of unmanned missions have been launched. But the red planet has become something of a Bermuda Triangle, with roughly 2/3 of all missions ending in failure. Given the danger and high cost, plans for a manned mission have been delayed for decades. But Dr. Bob Zubrin refuses to let the dream go.
NASA had plans to send people to Mars by 1981. Those plans were credible. We should have been on Mars a quarter century ago.
Bob Zubrin is president of the Mars Society, a coalition of scientists from all walks of the international space community. The Society has been lobbying Congress, NASA, and the government for years, determined to keep Mars exploration on the radar screen. And Zubrin has been making his own preparations. The Mars Society has set up Mars analog habitation modules in the deserts of Utah and the remote landscape of Devon Island in Canada.
What we're doing at these stations are really what someone would call operations research. We're trying to find out what field tactics and techniques would be most usefully applied on Mars, what technologies would be most useful to the crew.
Zubrin has more in mind than a quick trip across space. He plans to colonize the planet.
We're going to Mars because Mars is the planet that has on it the resources needed to support life, and therefore potentially someday human civilization.
For Zubrin, Mars is the new frontier.
Whether or not there has been life on Mars, whether or not there is life on Mars, there will be life on Mars. And it will be us.
There's still the mystery of the pyramids, the supposed signatures of an ancient Martian civilization. What if the beings that built the face are coming back? Could the enigmatic face in the hills of Cydonia really be a calling card from a lost civilization? Ironically enough, we might pick up some clues at the World Science Fiction Convention in Southern California. We're not here to look for Martian monument builders. Rather, we've come to meet astronomer Phil Plait. Plait's mission is to provide participants with a healthy dose of science fact. And today, he's taking on the face of Mars.
Just so we're clear on this, it's a rock that looks like a face, and it's not even that good of a face. It looks like he's got, I don't know.
Phil Plait is the creator of Bad Astronomy, a website and book dedicated to exposing what he calls pseudoscience. And he thinks the solution to this Martian riddle is simple.
There's a trait called pareidolia, and it is the tendency to see faces in random patterns, and we see this all the time.
But whatever the reason, Phil Plait thinks we can't always trust the evidence of our own eyes.
Our brains don't like random patterns. They want to find some sort of real pattern in the noise, in the randomness, even if it's not there. And so you can just take a collection of dots and you might see a head, or you might see Jesus in it. But that's just your brain trying to find a pattern desperately in something that is patternless.
If we take a closer look at the Martian terrain, it appears to be covered with faces. But Plait insists they're just face-like patterns, not monuments to ancient civilizations. But Richard Hoagland, the leading advocate for the theory of monuments on Mars, has countered this argument for years. He insists his theory is based on more than just a pretty face.
If I had to stake my entire almost 30 years now looking at this, that there was at one time intelligent life on Mars and they built something, I would say the geometry of Cydonia is now trillions to one against it being chance, and in any man's or woman's science, when you have that level of odds in your favor, you can say with relatively good backing that it's real.
But NASA scientist Jim Garvin has this to say about geometry.
It is possible to construct geometric patterns between anything. There's an infinite number, in fact, of different affine geometric patterns between this feature and that feature and this feature and that feature. To read one as being the answer to this particular small patch of Mars is extremely challenging to me and to the science community.
According to Garvin, those interesting pyramids and tetrahedral landforms are all wind.
If the wind is blowing one way for a while, and the next season it blows this way, and the next season it blows this way, and the next season it blows this way, what happens? Over time, if that's the consistent pattern of the wind, sandblasting, in this case a hill about 10 blocks in scale, you can produce landforms that remind one of pyramids.
Similarly formed natural structures called yardangs are found in the dunes of Egypt's western desert. Dr. Garvin sees the Cydonia region as a natural landscape shaped by the forces of erosion. But what about the face?
When I look at this picture on Mars, I see positive relief landform, a hill of the scale of multiple city blocks, very similar to tens of thousands of others on Mars.
But Dr. Garvin believes he can't prove anything with a two-dimensional snapshot. So in order to analyze the structure properly, he's created a 3D model of the landform by combining topographical data with a high-resolution 2D image. This allows him to observe the face as if he were flying around it in a helicopter. And from this height, the face dissolves into the landscape. There are no eyes and no mouth to be seen.
There's a lot of different interesting ways to look at this feature. The simplest way is the natural way. And that's always worked well in science.
Some people wonder why NASA doesn't just send one of its robots to investigate. But considering the enormous cost and the physical challenges of dropping a priceless asset such as a Mars rover, all targets need to be chosen with careful consideration on the basis of scientific priorities.
Why would we consider this a first priority? And that's the question I leave you with. We're looking for our origins in the history of life in the universe. And there is no evidence that that has a bearing on that question today.
Some people will continue to believe in the magic of ancient monuments, while others stick with the proven world of modern science. For centuries, the red planet has kept us guessing.
I think odds are we won't find life. There's no evidence, so I'm not going to bet my house either way.
The desire to know if there's life on Mars is so strong because it affects our own place in the universe.
We live in space as small, minuscule amounts of the matter that is the bigger space. The more we understand the history of life in this solar system, in this universe, the more we understand our own life and our own destiny.
It's been 30 years since a human last set foot in another world. If space exploration is to become a reality, not just of the past, but of our future, perhaps it's now time to set our sights on Mars.
There's some moments in history where you have the capability of doing something important, and I think that this generation has the capability of finding out whether we're alone or not.
It's something we all need to know.
If we search the universe and we find no evidence of life, we should start taking seriously the possibility that life on Earth is unique, really unique, and that in a very real way, the contribution of Earth to the rest of the galaxy, to the rest of the universe, may be life itself.
Perhaps even our worst Martian nightmare is better than finding out that we really are alone in the vastness of space. But if life does exist elsewhere in the universe, our best hope of finding it remains with the red planet, the remarkable neighbor that we call Mars.